25 Most Terrifying Maniacs and Murderers in Human History. We are starting a series of publications about the most frightening and dark serial killers in human history. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next episode.
The House That Swallowed Voices. Part 1. A Town Learning Not to Hear. There's a street in Gloucester that always looks calm in photos. Rain-dark brick, hairdresser signs, white enameled letterboxes. In the mid-1970s, had you walked down Cromwell Street in the evening, you would have heard laughter, music, and a particular thudding, as if someone downstairs was building and rebuilding, lifting planks one by one. Neighbors got used to it. Fred's a proper handyman. You get used to sounds the way you get used to your own shadow. But shadows always have a source. So does laughter. Part 2. Fred, From Soil to Darkness. Fred West grew up where summer smells of hay and winter of frozen earth. Childhood meant Herefordshire's fields, heavy work, plain talk, and rumors. In those parts, rumors outlived newspapers, and one of them concerned a family with blurred boundaries, a stern father, an unconditional mother, and a boy who learned too early what power and dependence can do. Before 30, he'd made a habit of running from consequences, petty thefts, rough relationships, jealous outbursts, constant lying that stretched and snapped like a concertina. In the early 1960s, he married a Scot named Rena, Catherine Costello. Rena already had a little daughter, Charmaine. Later, Anna Marie would be born. Pregnancy, poverty, quarrels, nothing settled. Around 1967, another name moved into orbit, Anne McFall, Rena's young friend, who would vanish before she could become a mother. Out on the edge of two fields, where briars scratch your trousers, the ground remembered her first. By then, Fred was a man in halves, outwardly affable and handy, inwardly angry at a world that wouldn't let him be in charge, tasting the sweetness of power whenever someone weaker crossed his path. Many accounts recall head injuries. After a crash, he turned sharper, more impulsive, as if something inside had snapped and chimed with every blow. Part 3. Rose. An Electric Rain in Childhood. Rosemary Letts was born in England's southwest. Her childhood was its own storm. A strict father, a household strung tight, talk of her mother's treatments, including the kind whose rooms smell of ozone and hospital rubber. In families like that, children learn to recognize danger by the rustle of a sleeve. Rose became an expert at it. As a teenager, she hunted for the attention she never had, sometimes defiantly, sometimes while hiding. When Rose met Fred, she was 15. He was older, more experienced, and smiled as though he knew a short way to where fear stops. Their union wasn't about love but gravity. Two cracks met and fused, forming a razor edge, the place where everything around them got cut. Part 4. The Meeting That Became a System. By the late 1960s, they were already together. Soon Rose would be minding Fred's children. For years to come, she would be minding her own as well. Around 1971, Rena disappeared. Close to that disappearance sits another name, Charmaine, an 8-year-old who stopped greeting the neighbors in summer. Theories and gossip would lap at the edges, but the fact remained, the girl did not grow up. The further they went, the deeper Fred and Rose built their small world with rules only they understood. In 1972, they moved into the address that would become a grim metaphor, 25 Cromwell Street. The house would grow inward. Crawl spaces, false floors, a cellar. He tamed the walls so that whatever they wanted could be done their way. Part 5. The First Crack in the Armor. A survivor in 1972. Caroline Owens entered their orbit, a young woman promised work and safety. Instead, she met attempts at control and assault. She escaped. She went to the police. It was one of those rare moments when reality tried to shake a town awake. But the case ended without proportional consequences. Minor indecency, a fine, a conditional sentence. Mistake 1. The system saw smoke and called it steam. There was no body, the key witness alive. Frightened wasn't enough for the heaviest charge, and juries often wobble when there isn't ironclad evidence. That missed chance was the first open window through which the house on Cromwell Street breathed deeper. Part 6. Lodgers, Hitchhikers, Neighbors. What the walls heard. From mid-1973 to the decade's end, the house became a gate. For many, a gate to nowhere. They arrived in many ways. For a room, for an evening, by mistake. Each had a name, each a life, a handful of postponed calls home. I'll speak their names as candles, not as headlines. Lynda, Gough, 1973. Lodger, vanished suddenly, as if she'd moved out without warning. That's what the neighbors were told. Caroline Cooper, 1973, 15. A bus that never delivered. She waited to become an adult and became a face on a missing poster. Lucy Catherine Partington, winter 1973-74. A student home for Christmas? Popping out for a book is normal, isn't it? The house never saw her return. Therese Siegenthaler, spring 1974. A Swiss student, in love with English roads and talk of freedom. Her road ended where freedom was only a borrowed word. Shirley Hubbard, late autumn 1974. An absence so textbook it sounds invented. Laughing with friends yesterday, silence tomorrow. Juanita Mott, 1975. She could belong in any company. The world is usually kind to such people. This house wasn't. Shirley Robinson, 1978, 18 and a little, another heartbeat within her. She believed promises. The promises believed in themselves. Alison Chambers, 1979. A runaway, a wing pinned to a shoulder. She sought refuge. She found a house that was a refuge only on its sign. This isn't the full list of what the walls whispered, but these are the names that the world would later speak officially. Between these lights lies a dark strip. Dozens of almost, might have, last seen near. And one more name most often spoken as a question. Mary Bastholm, 1968, a cafe waitress. She was never found. Her truth is a black ribbon tying facts together. Part 7. Family as trap, and a patio joke. Children grew up in that house. Social services dropped in and out, noting difficult family, strict father, demanding but caring mother. Family photos are the curse of every archive. They make everything look normal. Among the children was Heather, born to Fred and Rose. She grew up with the kind of caution that's hard to explain to outsiders. In the summer of 1987, she vanished. For her parents, it was convenient to say, she ran off with a friend, teenagers, you know. At home, a cruel joke appeared for misbehaving kids. Keep it up and we'll bury you under the patio, like Heather. That's a child's memory of terror masked as family humor. And here lies mistake 2. Authorities often treat such lines as hyperbole, yet sometimes hyperbole is a confession wrapped in a laugh. Part 8. How the town wakes up. The early 1990s. Children who survived the house, children who learned to move without making air, began to speak. First at school, then to police officers who were lucky enough to listen. An inquiry began that at first looked routine. Let's check on Heather's disappearance. She probably moved. Inquiries are drafts. They look for a gap. The gap appeared quickly. One daughter's account, then another's. Caroline Owens' old complaint resurfaced. Neighbors remembered strange smells in the yard. The house plans with its reworked cellar found their way into a careful detective's hands. March 1994, a warrant to excavate. In the yard of Cromwell Street, a careful operation unfolded. Not sledgehammers, but brushes, tape measures, photographs, a grid of twine dividing soil into squares. Excavation is always about respecting silence. When the first remains were found, the city's ordinary noise died. Fred said, "Yes, that's Heather." Then more remains, then more. The house started to pay its debts. Part 9. I'll take it all on myself. Fred West in a police station was a man used to never losing his own game. He quickly grasped the line to hold. It was me alone. Rose had nothing to do with it. He smiled, regretted, fumbled dates, and named names. The system finally did what it should have done 20 years earlier. It listened to the end. The dig grew wider, yard to cellar to other addresses where the family had lived. Their past wasn't a corridor but a web. At the same time, investigators finally saw a pattern whole. Victims were young women and girls, often vulnerable runaways, lodgers, those easiest to rewrite to new addresses and disappear from memory. Their tactic involved two people, a man and a woman. That dissolved a natural barrier. Women more readily trust a woman at the door. This criminal dyad is rare but especially dangerous. They don't just split roles, they intensify each other. Charges mounted against Fred. He tried to bargain, offering to show places, to help, to explain, sometimes in the tone of a man discussing home repairs. He remained within his own coordinates to the end. On 1st January 1995, they found him lifeless in his cell. He cut his own plot short, like a director who can't face a final QA. It wasn't catharsis, it was an evasion. Part 10. Rose alone. Before the jury, Fred's death meant this. Rosemary West was no longer the prisoner's wife, but the sole defendant. Her trial ran in autumn 1995 at Winchester. Unlike Fred, she chose total denial. Tactically, it made sense. Without his live testimony, she needed to break the dyad, to become the background, the housewife to a house of horrors who knew nothing. But the prosecution had more than a spade in a cellar. There were those who survived, children turned adults, and Caroline Owens, who had come to court once and not been fully heard. There was a coherent pattern of violence. Identical disappearance legends, identical traces of construction in the house, identical dead patches of yard, letters and belongings of victims that somehow remained in the house, and Heather, their own daughter, whose grave became a concrete joke for those who dared to speak loudly. A court squints at time. It stares down decades and tries to see what happened behind a door. The jury agreed with the Crown. Guilty on 10 counts of murder. Rose West was sentenced to life imprisonment with a whole life tariff. The I knew nothing line collapsed under the weight of repetition, the signature psychologists always look for. Part 11. A timeline. As a map storytelling breathes but coordinates help, here's as neat a map as one can set on a table without turning pain into a ledger. Early 1960s, Fred marries Catherine, Rena Costello. Anna Marie is born. Nearby is Charmaine, Rena's daughter from a previous union. 1967, Anne McFall vanishes. Rena's young friend, connection to Fred, pregnant. 1969-1970, Fred meets Rose. She becomes central in his domestic world. 1971, Charmaine and Rena disappear. 1972, move to 25, Cromwell Street, Gloucester. The Caroline Owens case ends lightly, a mischance. 1973-1975, disappearances of Lynda Gough, Caroline Cooper, Lucy Partington, Therese Siegenthaler, Shirley Hubbard, Juanita Mott. 1978-1979, disappearances of Shirley Robinson and Alison Chambers. 1987, Heather disappears. Parents embrace the runaway story. 1992-1994, new testimony from surviving children. Police return, excavations at Cromwell Street and elsewhere. 1995, Fred dies in prison, autumn trial of Rose, whole life tariff. 1996, the Cromwell Street house is demolished. The empty lot says more than any memorial. Part 12. The psychology of two, how a we destroys Fred, fits the pattern of a controlling offender with escalation. From manipulation to abduction, from dominance at home to hunting the vulnerable. He mixes popular chap charm with shameless cruelty. Risk factors, likely childhood abuse and the normalization of incest, early sexualization, head trauma, impulsivity, intolerance of refusal, pathological lying, and a near-engineering pleasure and control, locks, rooms, retrofits. Rose is best described as catalyst and co-author, not a passive wife but an active participant whose cruelty was no less than his. Her risk factors, abuse and humiliation in childhood, emotional coldness as a survival tactic, an internalized model of power where you are either the victim or the one who hurts first. In the dyad, Rose intensified Fred, and Fred gave Rose a structure in which her cruelty matured into normal. Synergy is the horror. Together, two offenders don't cancel each other. They legitimize one another. The inner judge falls silent. A righteous we appears. that we builds rooms where no outside conscience fits. Part 13, System Errors, where we could have turned back the Caroline Owens case, 1972. Police and court saw an incident, not a signal in a series. Undercharging and lenience weren't malice but the inertia of their era. A living complainant equals just words, and the accused looked ordinary. Social services, many visits, fragmented observations. One worker saw a bruise, another odd behavior, a third a noisy house full of kids. Nobody assembled a risk model, criminal histories, isolation of children, control of social ties, rehearsed runaway legends. The runaway myth. 1980s Britain had a wave of left home cases. Police often began there. For Heather, homely logic outvoted professional suspicion. When parents accept a runaway story too easily, suspicion should rise. Neighborly tolerance. It never appears in legal reports, but it matters. How fast we normalize strangeness if it lasts long enough. Noises in the cellar, night work. Lodgers moved on without collecting deposits. Each fact can be excused. The pattern only shows when someone lines them up. By the 1990s, police were already rereading serial patterns. That rereading likely saved those the house might otherwise have met a year or two later. Part 14. A trial big enough for everyone. Rose's trial wasn't only about what she did, but about how she pretended not to know. The prosecution showed how impossible it was to live for years in one house, to help select victims, repeat the legends, plan rooms, and not be part of the system. The children who survived spoke not only of unspeakable acts, but of the structure of power, who decided, who punished, who buried, and who fried eggs in the morning as if night had stolen nothing. A whole-life tariff is a British answer reserved for cases where society agrees there will be no reform. It isn't vengeance, it's a boundary. Sometimes a person is so welded to harm that no schedule of prison services can lower public risk. Part 15. The names like small bells. I've spoken them already, but I'll lift them again. Not for statistics, but for memory. The principal victims recognized by court inquiry, disappearance years per the investigation: Anne McFall, 1967, Charmaine West, 1971, Catherine Reyna, Costello, 1971, Lynda Gough, 1973, Carol Ann Cooper, 1973, Lucy Catherine Partington, 1973-74, Therese Siegenthaler, 1974, Shirley Ann Hubbard, 1974, Juanita Mott, 1975, Shirley Robinson, 1978, Alison Chambers, 1979, Heather West, 1987, and Mary Bastholm, 1968. A question that remains. She's the rest between notes, a silence waiting to sound. Part 16. What remains after a house is gone? They demolished 25 Cromwell Street. That was right. Places like this turn too easily into morbid pilgrimages. The empty plot whispers correctly. No footfalls in the cellar, no late music. What is left? The insight that two can be worse than one, not arithmetically, but geometrically. The need for social services and police to talk not only at meetings, but in everyday routine, folding little things into a true risk picture. The names of those who live survivors, not only as witnesses, but as people requiring rehabilitation, protection, and the right to build another life. Part 17. A postscript for those who still hear the Russell stories like this are hard to tell. Every sentence feels either too cold or too much, but they have a job to return names and show the system. Fred and Rose weren't mythic monsters. They were people who, step by step, claimed the right to choose who lives. They found in one another the perfect tool and turned an ordinary house into a mechanism. The mechanism was broken late, but broken. And every time a missing person report arrives with a too convenient ran away, I want someone in a police station, a child protection office, a school to remember this and say, let's check again. That's the world's answer to such houses: attention, persistence, and memory. Part 18. A short ledger of errors and lessons. Critical failures, undervaluing a living witness. Caroline Owens, 1972. Undercharging, no serial lens. Fragmented safeguarding. Observations never assembled into risk model. Isolation, injuries, control of ties, runaway legends. Normalizing teen runaways as a default. No active falsification of the Heather story. Weak interagency work. School social care police acted in sequence when they needed to act in parallel. What finally worked: repeated testimony from surviving children. An investigator willing to stitch fragments together. A prosecution strategy that showed a stable structure, not isolated tragedies. Meticulous forensic recovery. Slow, respectful extraction of facts from the ground. Psychological snapshot. Fred, impulsivity control, head trauma, normalized abuse, engineering the means of domination. Rose, cold empathy, internalized authoritarianism, active role, no internal no. Dyad, cruelty amplified by partnership, a female front, lowering victim defenses, mutual justification. Part 19, the childhoods that grew the rooms. Fred, the farm calendar, and the first lesson in Powerfield. Diesel, wet grass. The yard's arithmetic, the stronger is right. A collision of metal and glass left sharp edges, outbursts, impatience, a taste for the engineering of control. Locks, caches, crawl spaces. Handyman became a mask. Beneath it lay what people don't say aloud. Rose, electric rain and icy rules, a strict father, whispers about her mother's treatments. A girl learns to scan danger by the sound of the key in the door, to control what can be controlled. Order, chores, attention. Meeting Fred was a sign reading exit here. The first time power meant not being a victim if someone else became one. In that pact grew a union where two people felt less afraid because everyone else did. Part 20. The Victims' Lives, Not Case Files. Anne McFall, 1967. 19. Quick to trust and smile. Loved writing lists for the future. The list broke midline. Charmaine West, 1971. A straight back and a frank gaze. Girls like that grow up to change rules if they grow up. Catherine Rena Costello, 1971. A mother who wanted simple things. A roof, peace for the children, a fresh start. She held humor like a straw in a gale. Lynda Gough, 1973, 19. Bright earrings, easy laughter. The lodger neighbors praised. Caroline Cooper, 1973, 15. I'll get a job and buy a guitar. Loved looking at developed photos like proof happiness was real. Lucy Partington, 1973-74, 21. Could argue beautifully without wounding. Stepped out for a minute and never returned. Therese Siegenthaler, 1974, 21. A Swiss student. Neat postcards home. The winter card never arrived. Shirley Hubbard, 1974, 15. Sweet tea. Long talks about a future with a job, not like Mum's. Always near the window, else it's stuffy. Juanita Mott, 1975, 18. Could befriend opposites. Dreamt of her own room and no one telling her how to live. Shirley Robinson, 1978. Barely over 18. Stitched her own dresses from old fabric. Liked photos against graffiti walls. Another heartbeat inside her. Alison Chambers, 1979. 16. Adult not by makeup but by early independence. Moved between rented rooms, chasing a kinder silence. Heather West, 1987. A laugh you could pick out instantly. On school forms she left undecided, honestly. The house held too much silence for honesty. And Mary Bastholm, 1968, 15. A waitress in soft blue cardigans. Her trail ends without a line. Part 21. The Dig in the Inquiry, month by month, 1992, August. A school raises the alarm. Safeguarding checks begin still about the living. September, November. Interviews, home visits, first contradictions. A folder labeled Cromwell Street fattens. 1993, January, March. Sexual offense cases open. Witnesses are young, scared, dependent. April, June. Charges falter, speaking is dangerous. One detective keeps a sum that won't add up. Where is Heather? July, December. Heather's line becomes its own case. Inquiries to schools, benefits, employers, borders. No trace. Runaways usually leave a digital spore. Here, nothing. 1994 January. The team grows. Authority for deeper inquiries into Heather's disappearance. February. Warrant to excavate 25 Cromwell Street. The yard becomes a grid. The first find silences the street. Fred is arrested. March. Partial admissions. The search widens. Yard cellar. April. A corner of the cellar turns laboratory. Rose is arrested and interviewed. May. The map widens. Former addresses, rural spots where Fred liked to get things done. Old missing files are cross-checked for time and route overlaps. June, July. Fields near Much Markle remains recovered, later identified as Rana Costello and Anne McFall. A long trail appears far beyond Cromwell Street. August, September. Forensic results. Reconciliations with national missing lists. Prosecutors build a through-line, not isolated events, but a system. October, December. Expanded indictments for Fred. Distinct charges for Rose. Active digging ends. Document season begins. 1995 January. New Year's Day. One defendant exits. A logistics blow, not a factual one. The evidence already speaks. February, September. Quiet grind expert reports, witness preparation, careful care for surviving children, so they aren't broken a second time. October, November. Rose's trial at Winchester. Prosecution lays out an undeniable row of facts. The defense clings to, I didn't know. Jurors choose facts. December. Life without parole. No applause in the room, only a heavy, at last. 1996 spring. The house is demolished. The blank space is an ethical answer. No dark tourism. No turning pain into an attraction. Memory is not brick. Memory is names. Part 22. Closing. We saw more clearly which childhoods sprout rooms of control. We spoke the victims' names as biographies, not case numbers. We traced the investigation month by month, how chance hardened into system. Epilogue. What we owe the quiet one. Day a passerby on Cromwell Street will pause not in front of a house, but before air. Grass might ripple, the way cloth ripples over a wound. There's nothing to see, and that is the point. The town chose absence over spectacle. But absence, too, makes demands. It asks us to keep learning the hard lesson that safety is not the same as silence. That a neat story, she ran away, they moved on, maybe a blanket thrown over a well. It asks us to honor those who survived, not as vessels for our shock, but as people who have to build ordinary lives after extraordinary harm, and to do so under a sky that still contains the place where it happened. It also asks professionals, teachers, social workers, patrol officers to trust their unease, to put fragments together, to escalate one step earlier than feels polite, to listen to the joke that should never be a joke, to make check again a habit rather than a heroism. Most of all, it asks the rest of us for a quieter bravery, to resist the theater of horror in favor of memories, work speaking names, noticing patterns, and protecting the next person who knocks on a door that looks like any other door. A house can be knocked down. What we owe the quiet is to make sure its system doesn't get rebuilt somewhere else.